We are going to go through, in the next couple slides, I'm going to describe the platform in a little more detail and the additions, we call them, the sort of verticalized products that we've built on top of them. And then we're going to go and try to, if we have time, give you an example of a use case that can be solved by each of the additions. This will be made clearer in a second. But I wanted to start by a little bit of the discussion of the platform itself to begin with. And I read a bunch of your blogs leading up to this event. A lot of them reference cloud physics, and one of the, it wasn't ubiquitous, but one of the frequently asked questions that was coming out is, I really want to know if these guys are still 100% VMware today. So I just want to start with that up front because I know it'll come up again later, so let me just bring that up front. Yes, the answer is we are. There are a couple reasons for that. One of them is that, well, obviously, if you were going to start somewhere, they have 80% market share, so it's a good place to start. And the second is really that we've just been asked a lot of questions across time about what people can do, and a lot of use cases have been put at our front door that we've resolved based on that data set alone. But even though I can't show you a second data set today, it is not where we intend to stay. But I just want to make sure I address that up front because I know it's going to come up later. It is a current part of the definition of the product. I guess you could call it a limitation. So I'll just cop to that right up front. Now, what data do we collect through the lens of the virtualization layer? The product deploys, as John referenced, our observer. It's a virtual appliance that installs in the customer's VMware environment. And you need to install one of these virtual appliances for each end customer vCenter. For some of our customers, that means one virtual appliance. For some, that means 17 or 25. That's the only thing that has to be installed. There's no agents at this point or anything else. Through the lens of that virtualization window, we get access to all the data that vSphere can provide to us. So obviously that extends well along the virtualization tier itself. We get to see all the hosts that are supporting the virtualization tier. We get relationships between them, how those hosts are clustered together, what VMs are on what clusters, how those clusters in turn access the network and the data stores. And you wind up getting what I refer to as a graph of the data center viewed as through the lens of the virtualization tier. So it's a fairly broad swath of what the data center contains, and it's everything that supports the compute infrastructure. On top of that, then, we also grab, as I just mentioned, those interrelationships between that. So it's not just this graph, but it's how these things dynamically interact and how they move around on top of one another to support the workloads that are running the business. On top of that, we capture all of the configurations of all those machines. So we immediately capture all of the vCPU and VRAM associated with every VM. We can tell you the capacities of all of the underlying host servers. We can look at the I/O characteristics of the storage and all these sorts of things. So you start to see that we're building up these layers of information that give us a pretty rich platform of data from which to start to extract insights. Where it gets really interesting for me, and where we've spent most of our development recently, is then on the capture of the resource utilization. So you've got the object configuration. So you might have a VM that's a 2 vCPU, 4 gig of RAM configuration. But then when you start to look at how much that VM happens to actually use of those resources, you can start to make optimization decisions. You can start to get insights about how the data center is running, and so on and so forth. I've just put some examples. These are all just examples of the things that we see. Obviously, within the realm of memory, there are probably a dozen metrics that we capture. And we capture them every 20 seconds. So we get a very granular look at the data center's actual functioning use of the resources that are available to it every 20 seconds all the time, and we never throw any of that data away. What we do to make it more usable is I went the wrong way? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. To make it more usable is we take all that information that we've captured about the resource utilization and we view it across time, and we create derived data points based on histograms. So we can tell you at the end of every day what every VM in the environment used at peak, at 99th percentile, at mean, at median, et cetera, for every object in the environment, for all the VMs, for all the hosts, the clusters themselves, the data stores, for this wide array of metrics. It's when you get that sort of view of resource utilization across time, and you can both compare it to configurations and compare it to other types of utilizations, like comparing host utilization to VM utilization, that you can start to really optimize the environment in the support of certain use cases. So that's how I like to describe the platform. You have the observer that gets installed in the customer environment. It throws data up into the data lake, which is sort of a semi-structured pool of data. And then we start to structure it on top with this data platform that captures the configurations, the map, and the resource utilization across time. That's sort of how I like to view and describe the platform itself. We have brought to market 3 different products, or additions we call them, on top of that, really to And the third is a bit of a, I'll describe it in a second. So the premium edition is our IT operations analytics tool that's sold into enterprises to use to optimize their own environments, look for performance problems, and those sorts of things. And we're going to talk about those. Some of the types of use cases that are built on those are storage management, network management, performance optimization, cloud costing, cloud migration analyses, things like that, as well as you'll see at the end, the ability to benchmark the utilization of any given customer against the global data set to see how you're doing in comparison to your peers. The Partner Edition was something that we announced this year, although we started using it and launching it in Q4. Partner Edition starts to get into the world that John was talking about, where you have collaboration among the various constituencies that all surround the end customer. So the Partner Edition allows vendor partners, channel partners, and service provider partners to leverage our underlying platform to, in essence, create different types of assessments that the partner may want to run in conjunction with this customer to use unbiased data to be able to define what sorts of optimizations they might want to take place. If you're thinking about introducing a new set of infrastructure like a hyper-converged infrastructure, you want to do a lot of assessments in advance. If you're thinking about migration to cloud, you're going to want to look at each VM, each cluster, each application, figure out if it fits best to go to the cloud, et cetera. So we've outfitted the underlying platform with a Partner Edition to allow you to run these assessments, and I'll talk to that a little bit. And then the Developer Edition, you'll notice, is in quotes. The reason it's in quotes is you're not going to find Developer Edition with a price point anywhere on the CloudPhysics website. What this is a nod to is that we're increasingly having third parties, either our customers themselves, and John will do some demos of that when we get there, or vendor and channel partners, who are working with us to create custom-defined applications or cards that will be in concert of their particular use case. So this might be a service provider looking for an opportunity to do storage reclamation in his customer environment. This might be a channel partner looking to help a customer price out his potential move to a public cloud hosting provider. Those sorts of things, and we'll go into about 4 or 5 examples of those, including some large enterprises who are doing some pretty innovative stuff. John's going to come back to that in a little while. I'm going to walk through these two, and because we have both some really interesting stuff to discuss here, and then we have some stuff that follows on with the global data set and some other things at the end, I'm going to try to move through these very quickly because this one in particular is probably what you think of when you think of cloud physics. So I'm going to go through one particular use case. And then this one I think I can go through fairly quickly because, well, I'll get to that in a second. So to begin with, our Premium Edition. OK, so what is the problem that the Premium Edition addresses at its core? It's this. There's a tension in the virtual data center administrator's environment, trying to balance between ensuring or increasing application delivery performance and also simultaneously increasing resource utilization. They're in conflict with one another. If all you wanted to do was optimize service delivery performance, you'd provision a new physical server for every workload and be done with it, right? You'd massively over-provision the environment and you'd never have a performance problem. On the flip side, if all you wanted to do is maximize the utilization of your compute and storage resources, eventually you'll get to a point where that's going to start to impact performance negatively. So trying to keep these two in balance, up and down the IT administrator's office, from the admins up through the VP or CIO, is really what we're trying to do, is provide people visibility into where you could potentially optimize your resources a little bit more effectively, but then also give you flags that say, oh, you've started to impact your performance, or you've started to introduce contentions in the environment for those resources because you've overloaded things. So really, that's the goal of the Cloud Physics application as pertains the Premium Edition focused on end users. The use case I've decided to go through, and I think I can do this fairly quickly because there's a somewhat dated webinar on Bright Talk that goes through some of this, although it's in the context of a specific performance problem, is the notion of I/O contentions. So I/O contentions, I'm sure it's an intuitive term. The way we view them and the way we've approached them is we look at data stores and we identify the VMs that have vDisks on those data stores. And when those VMs begin to behave anomalously in such a way that a particular VM can start to starve other VMs from the I/O resources that they need to perform. Based on our analysis, I/O contentions, whether you look at other types of contentions like CPU contentions, memory contentions, et cetera, storage I/O contentions are most frequently the culprits of performance degradation if there is a resource component problem as opposed to an application level problem. So what we've done is we've created a set of applications on our platform that work in concert to help people identify either emerging I/O contentions problems or existing I/O contentions problems and point to the victims of that I/O contention problems in the form of the VMs that are negatively impacted, and also point to the culprits of the VM. This is the one that is behaving anomalously and using more than its fair share of the available I/O resources. Resolution, obviously, you can move things around or change I/O controls. But this is more about the analysis to identify the problem. So really quickly, I need to discuss some of the CloudPhysics data presentation motifs that you're going to see within the application. The highest level of abstraction is our dashboard. And that has trending widgets, consolidation across time, those sorts of things. It identifies, in this case, what I'm going to focus on is a top 10 list of data center I/O contention culprits. Beneath that, we have two different other motifs. One is use case centric and one is object centric. So the use case centric one you may be familiar with, it's the notion of a card. A card is built on our application and it answers a particular question or addresses a particular use case for the end customer. And it's usually not temporally aware, or if it is temporally aware, it may be 24 hours. It's what's happening right now if you want to view a current problem in the environment. So dashboards tend to give you trends across time. Cards tend to give you what's happening right now for that particular use case. And objects flip this on its head. So in this motif, you're going to see a card that gives you a problem and all the VMs or hosts that have that problem. In this case, you're going to zoom in on the VM and you're going to see all the problems it has or all the impacts it has in the environment, its use of resources. So I just need to address that because when I go into the app, it might be confusing if you don't have that grounding. So I'm going to start by showing one more slide. And I have to give a shout out to Anthony Spiteri at Zetagrid. You guys may be familiar with him. He has graciously given us permission to use his data set that he manages throughout the demos today. He's a friend of CloudPhysics. And the reason I'm pointing this out is we call this the weekly dashboard. It goes out every Monday to all of our customers. And it shows weekly change in a variety of different metrics. And it also has a section at the bottom that highlights potential issues that are happening right now. So you see there's some issues that were identified, one of which is 11 VMs have experienced performance degradation due to data store contention in the last 24 hours with a link to the VM I/O contentions card. So part of what we're trying to do at CloudPhysics is put information in front of the customers that is relevant to them that they may want to take action on. And in the context of this particular use case I'm going to walk through, which is VM I/O contentions, we highlight that in the weekly digest.
Can I ask a question?
Please do.
So I guess isn't this information that I could get from vSphere? Since I'm already looking at vSphere?
You can get the info. So, okay, there are a couple different ways to answer that question. You will not be told by vSphere that a particular VM has, on average, caused 9 contention events over the last 24 hours over the last week. You're not going to get from vSphere the information that the overuse of I/O from this particular VM is negatively impacting these other 7 very specifically named VMs that may be on different clusters that just happen to be accessing vDisks on the same machine. What we're trying to do is sort of pick up where vSphere tools leave off and provide a layer of analytics that can sort of get a little bit deeper and find correlations and other sorts of data mashups and things like that that'll highlight these problems that are otherwise hidden. And I think that'll come through when I show the demo. This is part of our dashboard. There's some widgets above, there's some widgets below. I'm zooming in on this one because, as I said, I'm trying to walk through this one particular use case.
You guys have the best graphic designers. It's just the prettiest graphs and some of this stuff.
Well, thank you. They're dynamic, too. Yeah, so for example, if I'm looking at this one, which I'm not intending to do, I can quickly switch just because I thought you'd like that. Remove the thin provisioning component of the reclaimable storage space. This is another use case I'm not going through today. We have a variety of different places throughout the environment where we identify storage that's not being currently used, and it could be potentially reclaimed and put to new purpose, but it is already allocated. So leaving that aside, what I have over here is what we have a list of is the top culprit VMs for storage I/O contentions as ranked by number of contention events over the last 7 days, on average over a 24-hour period. So this is means 9.4 hours per day over the last 7 days on average. This was causing contention problems on another machine, on another virtual machine. And here we're just listing the top 10, and you can see what's happening across time. If I scroll over that, you'll see that on any point during the day, I can show you that at this point it was 4. You also see, it's a little hard to see on this screen, but there are certain of these in the latency column that are rimmed by little pink bubbles. If I scroll over one of those, we can compare the latency impact of this particular VM or the latency experience of this particular VM to the rest of the global cloud physics population and identify where you rank to sort of give people a sense of when they really have a problem that's actually 98% of the cloud physics population is better than this one from a latency perspective, those sorts of things. And then if I identify one that I want to take a look at, let's say I just choose this VPS one, for example, I can expand that row, and I can see other information about it. I can see the average latency, IAPS, and throughput. I can see sorry, I'm staying here. There's some information that's not showing up on the screen over here. But in any event, you start to see the other impacts over 7 days and 30 days for this particular VM, get a little more information about it. I can also, at any point in time from any object view in our environment, there's a little icon here. Obviously, I don't have access to Anthony's vSphere environment, but if I did, I could click that icon and I would be sent into the VMware console, the vCenter console, in the context of this object where I could begin to make changes in the vSphere environment. So we're not trying to command that. We're trying to highlight the problems and then send you over where you have the runtime environment to make changes. You'll see down here I have a VMIO contentions card link. I'm going to get to that in a second, a different way. What I'm going to start with is I'm going to click on the VM itself, and this will bring me into what we call the VM Explorer mode.
Okay, Chris?
This is the Object Explorer.
You said these were VMs that were
causing problems.
that were having contention.
Yes.
Would be nice to see who that contention was with.
You'll see that in a second.
Okay.
That's in the card. The card gets to this information at a lower level.
You know, the one really general objection I've had from people about cloud physics is, you know, yes, I understand that it's valuable to the community and to the world that it's a software as a service cloud application, but that's my data and I don't want it leaving my data center. Any plans to come up with an on-premise?
No, we haven't. In fact, what we're finding in the marketplace is that we don't encounter that objection that frequently, and when we do, it's usually with larger scale enterprise customers, and there is a very strict engagement that we go through that addresses the concerns that take, I think, the user from kind of just an initial reaction to a deeper understanding of what data are being collected.
The more you look at it, the more you realize the data that's leaving your data center is riskless.
Right.
But I do hear it.
Tell that to a lawyer.
Especially your lawyers.
We did.
Your lawyers are more.
Don't always need it, no matter what.
No, I get you. We did, though. We put this in front of our European lawyers, specifically in the context of German law, to make sure that the data that was leaving through the VApp and coming to the United States would not be in violation of the Patriot Act. So your point is well taken. There's an inherent underlying fear. I feel that it's getting far less significant across time.
Okay,
I was doing SAS backup in 2006, and it would be every other conversation. But I think people have just gotten more and more accustomed to it today, and it's less of a concern for them than it used to be.
If you were doing SAS backup in 2006, that was people who didn't understand that encryption worked.
And then SAS backup is the actual data rather than metadata and
Precisely.
statistics.
That can't leave Germany. The nature of it is that the dashboard highlights a long-running trend of contention events, but it doesn't rank them based on the severity of the event. It's not ranked in terms of the latency impact of the event. So what that means is you can view the dashboard widget as a precursor to a problem that hasn't occurred yet. When you get into the card, what you would have seen if I was able to demo it, hopefully I will be in a little bit, would be all of the cards, all of the current contention events that are ranked by latency. So you actually see right now where the fires are burning, where the actual latency impact is most negatively impacting the environment. And then you also, when you get into the Explorer flow, which is what I was trying to go into when I got kicked off, what you start to see there is an object-centric view of all of the metric trends across time that allow you to look at the storage, latency, and I/O going back across time. You can span back and forth and view it to try to highlight where there might be problems and contention zones, and you can zoom in on those time periods where there were contentions and see the impacts. You can jump out and look at the host and jump into other VMs. It's a really sort of robust use case to walk through the application and view all of the different UI motifs. And hopefully I'll be able to get back to that in a second. Some of the other use cases, just to highlight them quickly, some of the other use cases that come with Premium Edition are storage space management. I mentioned that one quickly. Inventory rationalization, that's the notion of saying, I've looked at the peak utilization of all the VMs in the environment over the last week. I've looked at the capacity of the host. I can deploy more VMs on this without negatively impacting the underlying host infrastructure. That's also capacity planning. I almost just put /capacity planning. Performance troubleshooting. We have the ability to identify not just I/O contentions, but other resource contentions that are going to slow down the behavior of the application.
How much what if can I do in the capacity planning?
So today,
Because, the case I'm looking at is, I've got a dozen 5-year-old servers.
right.
With 4-core processors.
Right.
How many 18-core processors do I need to replace them?
So what's interesting is if you're doing that type of transformation, when we work with the predominantly partners to create these sorts of custom analytics, you kind of have to drill in at the VM level. Because the boxes behave so differently outside the scope of the amount of megahertz that they have available today than they did 4 years ago, given the time span that you just described, that trying to look at the behavior of the hosts and translating that doesn't work as well as looking at the aggregate behavior and utilization of the resources of the VMs and mapping that.
That's why I want you to do it, and I just don't want to just multiply cores by gigahertz.
And hope for the best.
Yeah.
Right, because it's going to be better than that. You're going to do better than that with new hardware, right? So the answer is we have experience with that. We have analytics with that. I don't have it as part of the Premium Edition product right now. It would fall into the Developer Edition. We're doing that with some of our partners for different reasons, and providing VM level outputs that can be consumed by other applications in a very platformy type way. That's how we're sort of exposing that today.
And stuff will trickle down from developer into premium over time, I'm sure.
Already has.
Yeah.
Already has. In fact, I have one example I could show you. In fact, it's in John's section. There's a particular screenshot of a card. So Partner Edition we announced earlier this year, and I'll put up the next slide because the reason we announced it was, what is it for? And it's really to help partners work with their customers to answer questions using data. So today's channel partners or vendor partners call up down a call list and they start asking questions that are meant to tease out potential needs and opportunities within the customer. The customer doesn't appreciate that, and the vendor partner is wasting his time. What the customer does appreciate is when the vendor partner can call them and say, I've been observing your behavior, the behavior of your environment, and I can tell you that you need another hyperconverged device added to this. You need a new server added to this cluster. I can tell you that this particular host is incompatible with the version of vSphere you're trying to run on it. So the types of questions is the hardware compatible with software? Are my enterprise workloads candidates for potential public cloud migration? We get this one all the time. Is my customer's data center configured in accordance with the latest best practices and knowledge base articles? Which configuration of my infrastructure catalog is the best fit for my customer? So on and so forth. And the idea is we've given you a platform, Mr. Partner, on which you can create all sorts of ad hoc analytics that will answer these questions in your particular use case. Or frankly, we've given it to the end customer if they have a particular problem, and that's one of the things John's going to show. That highlights what that drills in on the answers to these questions so that when the salesperson calls somebody up, he's not saying, hey, I want to sell you something today. He's saying, hey, I have an assessment that I want to offer you. It's a storage sizing assessment.
That will lead me into wanting to sell you something
tomorrow. Let me deploy only if you need it, right? It's an unbiased view. You're looking at the data. If the data says you don't need it, you can counter it.
You're providing an unbiased view.
Right.
My reseller is a bias.
May not be, but you as the consumer can say, what the heck are you talking about? I've got plenty of I/O headroom. I don't need more devices. I don't need a new caching layer. I don't need any of that, right? I can see that I'm using what I'm using. So what is it? It's the core of it is these assessments, and we have certain packaged assessments that you see listed up here that are ready to go at a moment's notice. But we also can create ad hoc assessments and even ad hoc analytics to create and add to assessments to be able to answer these sorts of questions for our partners. We have something called the Customer Insights Report that I'll show you in a second, which gives you a view across the customers and the potential problems they might have, so you can hone in on that. You get access to our partner portal, and then you get a bunch of enablement and training type stuff that you'd expect. Yes, sir?
So if I'm a channel partner, I've got a set of customers. When I start ingesting their information that I'm observing and managing, do they also get a window into the very same information?
Exactly the same view.
Exactly the same.
Exactly the same view.
So there's no opportunity to manipulate or massage?
No. In fact, all the partner gets is access to the customer's view. Now, we've streamlined the workflow such that when you log in, either as a partner or as a customer, you get defaulted directly into the assessment, so you don't have to traverse through the dashboard to get there. But you're seeing exactly what the customer sees. You're effectively viewing it through the eyes of the customer.
Is there some, because obviously the customer doesn't want to see any other customers, but from a cloud provider or service provider, do you have aggregate views that you can group customers together and do that kind of thing? Because you want two things. You want to be able to view the customer's environment to be able to advise them,
yes,
but you also want to manage your environment and what scale
right.
you've got.
So bear in mind that this is a SaaS delivered application, so all of the customer's data actually comes into the CloudPhysics universe. Then we just filter by rights who can see what. So in the context of the partner, if you're the Uber admin of the partner, you'll see all the customers and all the assessments that they're associated with and who the salesperson is and all these, when they last logged in, all sorts of information, right? But if you're just a user at the partner, a salesperson or somebody who owns the partner, you'll only get access to the customers that you particularly signed up. And it looks like this. Oh, this is really too bad. I can't see on the screen. I'll just try to paint it with words. This is our partner portal viewed two different ways. So what you see up here, although you really can't, is there are two different tabs at the top, one for customers and one for assessments. It's funny, I took such great pains to obscure the personal information here. It doesn't mean a thing. You wouldn't have seen it anyway. So what you don't see here, because I've obscured it, is customer contact, partner contact, individual names, what CloudPhysics Edition they are on, how many hosts they have contracted, how many are managed, when does their assessment start and finish, so on and so forth. We've added other information here, even since I took this screenshot that shows what assessments they're associated to. And then you have another tab up here called Assessments, which gives you, it turns the whole thing on its head. That's in the next slide, actually. What I showed here is if you expand any individual customer, you'll see who is managing them. You can change who's managing them. You can add new assessments with the start assessments and add it from a new drop-down of assessments. So as a partner, you have these different tools through the customer view to be able to manage what they can see. And then you can flip the whole thing on its head and view it from the Assessments tab, which gives you a list of the currently available running assessments, the customer list that's currently running them, the ability to start an assessment and add it to a new customer, et cetera. So from within this, you have the ability to both manage customers from that perspective and manage assessments from that perspective. And to give you an example, with each one of these, we offer the ability to create this is part of the Enablement Platform, a web asset that we create that includes your marketing literature, and it lets customers come here. This way the partner can drive end customers here through marketing. And it lets the customer select from the available currently running assessments that partner has in market. And when they click submit, then they show up in the partner portal and they can identify their partner rep in this process and be added to that partner rep's universe. So this is an externally facing website. We've got about a half dozen or a dozen of these running right now on our website that people can sign up for to be able to get access to these assessments. So there's a number of different ways to onboard, and it's sort of this all holistic workflow we've put in place. So then we have the Customer Insights Report. This turns it on its head and provides, and I've obscured a significant amount of this. You'll see that there are columns here that are cut off. This would have been centered to sort of protect things.
Yeah, but resellers love anything that says opportunities. Right, Matt?
But the idea is, if you look in here, you can see a variety of different things about the customer's inventory. How much storage they have, memory, top CPU manufacturer, top host vendor. You get a look at their risk profile in terms of top end-of-life OSs, Heartbleed, different types of things, and this is constantly getting added to. You see different services opportunities, which is essentially more about the reclaimable space opportunities today. And then you see upgrade opportunities for incompatibilities within the environment that we detect. So this is another way to sort of get a view into how the customer is, what the opportunities might be for optimization between the customer and the partner. I couldn't demo this because obviously it's very sensitive information and the partners wouldn't want me to demo and show who their customers were and things like that. So I had to do it through these doubly obscured screenshots.
Okay, you're going to talk about licensing, right?
I wasn't going to, but I can. I know that. What's your question?
Well, how are both editions licensed? Because I would imagine that something like temporary license, that the partner edition would involve you get to instrument this customer for this period of time before they have to buy premium edition.
Right. Okay. So there are multiple editions that an end customer can be placed on. You can register for a free edition. Anybody in this room can register for a free edition. It's a very watered down subset of the overall capability. But candidly, you can stay on that edition for as long as you want because it's a watered down taste. Okay.
Right.
And we have customers who have been on that for years, who have just been on free edition. What we provide them is adequate for their needs. Then you get the opportunity to go to a trial, which is a full featured view of the product that lasts for 14 days, and then it just turns off.
Having done that, 14 days is short.
Yeah.
Well,
45 days would be more reasonable.
for you, kind sir, talk to me, we can extend you.
I trust me, I understand I'm a special character.
Yes, that's exactly right.
But in general,
And then licensing to end customers, to the premium edition licensing, is based on host count, aggregate hosts under management, and it's usually a 1, 2, 3-year subscription. The partner edition is licensed like you might expect a product that would be sold into a partner type community like a Salesforce. It's sold by seat, and then you also pay for a certain aggregate number of customers that can be on it at any given time. So people, and then you also pay for assessments set up. If they're custom assessments, there can be other line items, et cetera. But in essence, it's number of seats that you want your end users to be, or your partner users to be able to use, and then and then the aggregate number of people that are using it at any given time.
okay, and then that aggregate number I can rotate from customer to customer as I
Right.
troll them
As they
looking
roll
for
off and go into
opportunities.
new ones, right. Right. And the other thing to keep in mind is a customer who is brought on for an assessment can stay on as free and just use free edition forever.
Yes, but I've looked at free edition.
Okay. Fair enough. I'm going to launch into developer edition. Should I try to get back on the?
Yeah, you can.
I was having trouble with the WebEx.
I'm on my
Going to work.
phone
Wi-Fi
here.
earlier.
The Wi-Fi, yeah.
Yeah, it's spotty, but hopefully I can get there.
Well, we are consuming a little bit of bandwidth in the room.
Yeah, I suppose that's probably true.
Stop
Downloading torrents, Howard.
What's that?
Stop downloading torrents.
Yeah, exactly.
How am I going to
exactly.
have porn to watch on the plane home?
I'm still busy grabbing your music collection.
Yeah, I know. Chris,
Yes, sir.
and in terms of the partner edition, is the data collected, stored in that same global data lake, or is that stored within the premises of the partner itself, only for those customers to which they're collecting,
So-
from which they're collecting?
That's a very good question. I should have said something along these lines earlier. One of the benefits of the SaaS model is the global data lake. And so we have sort of mini reservoirs of data for each customer that we then have a platform on top of, and they can do these analytics. We also anonymize their data into this global data lake that we have that puts them all together and lets us run these globally interesting queries, and we're going to show some of that information here in a few slides. The nice thing about the deployment model where everybody gets the CloudPhysics Observer, whether you're on free or if you're on premium trial or you're signed up for an assessment or any other reason, all that data goes into the lake. So we're continually growing the richness and statistical significance of the data lake, irrespective of what the customer's using us to do. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I can see scenarios in which we, as a partner, might house a slew of our customers within a sort of a narrowed version
Right.
of the data lake, thereby retrieving data that's uniquely relevant to us, as well as to those customers that we would want to
Right.
support.
Right.
And what you're saying is you can not only do that, but also filter that data
Yes.
upward into the global data lake.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. And we can do those sorts of custom editions very easily for partners. That's what we call the assessment decks. So we would just put all the analytics that are required for your needs, it'll build a deck of cards based on exclusively those and let you run wild with it.
From a nuts and bolts perspective, how much data are we storing? Say we're doing full spectrum analytics on, say, a 100-host customer. Do you have any idea of what the sheer volume of storage that would?
I don't.
Yeah, so it's variable because we're collecting continuously. So
Sure.
there's the initial baseline, and then a lot of the continuity is also dependent on how transactive all of that is. So it's hard to kind of give a rough estimate of what a given environment might look like until you actually see it.
Well,
So-
sure, but if you're trying to do some sort of planning for an environment like this, and again,
Yeah.
we have service provider functionality.
Yeah.
It would be really beneficial to know how much storage I'm going to be chewing up.
But it's not
You're not
your-
chewing it
You're
up.
not
Well-
chewing it up.
It just comes to us.
Yeah.
So
one of the-
even though we've got a subset, and maybe we'd be extracting that
Oh,
data.
I see.
Got
You
it,
want to
got
pull
it.
it down.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's a model we haven't done today, but there's no reason it's not feasible to either reverse direct it to you or come up with some on-premise.
There's got to be a way. Yeah, it would be nice to, although you must be consuming sheer gobs of data.
Tons and tons, and we never throw any of the raw data away. It just lives forever. And like I said, we do, for the purposes of actually being able to query that much data, we do things like the histograms and other things to, without losing too much of the sort of definition of the data, we group it together in ways that
Yeah.
make it easier to deal with. But there's tons of data.
Yep. I mean, that's the core economic benefit, right? Is you offload all that craziness from an on-premise solution to putting it in a SaaS infrastructure that's designed, with that kind of scale and elasticity.
If you don't mind my asking, where are you housing this?
EC2 currently?
EC2.
Yep.
All in. Okay.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
We
I
turn the-
may have misunderstood something, not during the presentation, but while I was looking at this before, when you had your partner edition. Was there talk on your website about vendors having access to this, or was I mixing up partners and vendors as well?
No, we have vendors as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We're confusing things a little bit by putting it in the developer edition, but we have an example
Okay,
of
that's
that as
fine.
well.
I'll wait
that
for
we'll
that.
share.